What happens when a television titan reaches his limit? For more than 10 years, Simon Cowell and David Walliams dominated primetime TV as an unbeatable pair. Yet, beneath the applause and standing ovations, a bitter rift was quietly growing. One fueled by betrayal, clashing egos, and a scandal few ever anticipated. Now, the truth has finally come to light, revealing Simon Cowell's explosive reaction after David Walliams publicly lashed out, pushing their partnership to a dramatic breaking point. From 2012 through 2022, Britain's Got Talent was more than just a competition. It was a cultural sensation. At the heart of that success was a partnership that seemed destined for television history. Simon Cowell, the sharp-tongued media mogul, and David Walliams, the witty, unpredictable provocateur, combined forces to create a dynamic that went far beyond the usual judging panel. Simon's empire was built on cutting critiques, but David's wild humor and unexpected jabs kept both contestants and audiences perpetually on their toes. Together, they became the pulse of the show. While viewers were dazzled by the acts on stage, the real entertainment was often the electric tension and playful banter between the two judges. Their exchanges became the essence of the program's appeal. The chemistry was unmistakable. Simon's icy, commanding presence perfectly countered by David's warmth and clever wit, drawing millions to their screens, hungry for each new episode and the drama it promised. They weren't just judges, they were the defining force behind Britain's Got Talent, transforming it into a spectacle of personalities as much as a showcase of talent. Yet behind this glittering on-screen harmony lurked a complicated off-camera reality. What seemed like effortless rapport was actually a fragile balancing act. Each judge played a carefully scripted role. Offstage, tensions simmered quietly. Simon's dominant personality clashed subtly with David's flair for the unexpected, and though it worked for a time, the cracks began to show. Simon brought his global TV empire's weight, while David injected freshness and unpredictability that won over the crowd. But over the years, the imbalance grew harder to mask. The public never saw it, but behind the spotlight, the partnership shifted. What started as equals sharing the spotlight slowly tilted. Behind their polished smiles and sparkling exchanges lay a different truth. Simon Cowell, the self-made kingpin of television, treated Britain's Got Talent as his personal legacy, a realm where every decision, from the acts chosen to the casual banter, passed through his scrutinizing eye. There was no room for challenge. Simon ruled this kingdom with absolute authority. Meanwhile, David Walliams viewed the show through a different lens. For him, it was one chapter in a diverse career, as comedian, writer, actor, and now judge. David's humor was his hallmark, but his heart was never fully invested in Simon's carefully crafted empire. While Simon saw the show as a cornerstone of his legacy, David saw it as a temporary stage, a playground to test his limits and seek new challenges. This fundamental difference brewed tension beneath the surface. Simon demanded allegiance. David offered none. He wasn't there to be a cog in Simon's machine, but to shine as himself, to carve out his own space. The pressure to both fit into Simon's vision and maintain his independence strained their relationship. Small signs, sideways glances, subtle dismissals during meetings, built into a silent standoff. Where Simon saw Britain's Got Talent as a jewel in his crown, David often treated it as just another job. What was once an exciting partnership gradually became a battleground of pride and power. For Simon, the show was his empire, his vision to protect and shape. For David, it was a temporary stage to entertain and engage, at least until the growing fissures could no longer be ignored. Tension brewed quietly, never erupting fully but always lurking beneath the surface. Each season added weight to this unspoken conflict. What started as a vibrant collaboration between two strong personalities evolved into a delicate, often tense balancing act. Could this uneasy dynamic hold for another season? Or was the end of this golden duo inevitable? Only time would reveal the answer. Then came the hot mic scandal. January 2020 at London's Palladium was meant to be a night of glitz, glamour, and the sharp-witted charm Britain's Got Talent fans had come to expect. The judges were stars in their own right, icons of British entertainment poised to shine. But behind the cameras, something unseen was about to unravel the polished image. During a break in filming, the set fell quiet. The judges were off-screen, and the crew momentarily paused. Yet the microphone stayed live, capturing every sound. No one realized these devices were still recording. What followed was a private moment that would soon explode into public controversy. These comments, meant only for a private venting, revealed a side of Williams that clashed starkly with his polished public image. Yet in today's digital world, privacy is fragile and fleeting. The microphones recorded everything. For 2 years, the audio remained buried in the show's vaults, hidden from public eyes. No one imagined the day would come when these words would leak, shaking the very foundation of the show and its beloved judge. But then, the unthinkable happened. The recording was made public. The offensive remarks ignited outrage and instant backlash. Simon Cowell's reaction was immediate and intense, his frustration boiling over as he confronted David Walliams. The once unbreakable duo now stood on the edge of collapse. The scandal dominated headlines, with critics and fans alike dissecting every word. David Walliams, once untouchable, found himself in the eye of a relentless storm. His carefully cultivated reputation was under siege. Though he quickly issued a formal apology and his team scrambled to repair the damage, the fallout went beyond his words. The real shock was how the private rant became public, exposing cracks not just in the man, but in the very partnership that had defined a decade of British television. The leak wasn't just a slip. It tore open a wound that never quite healed. In the world of television, where trust is currency, that moment felt like someone had flipped the table on years of carefully curated camaraderie. The recording, once confined to the private walls of a production room, had been set loose like wildfire. What was meant to stay among friends became a public ordeal, and David Walliams found himself the face of scandal. The worst part wasn't what he said. It was that someone from his own team had handed it over to the world, turning backroom banter into front-page shame. That betrayal didn't just sting. It rewrote the rules of engagement for talent and production crews alike, casting a shadow over the show's legacy. Behind the glamour of Britain's Got Talent lay a growing silence, the kind that echoes louder than any judge's buzzer. For Walliams, the road ahead was brutal. Once beloved for his cheeky charm and wit, he now wore the weight of suspicion and skepticism. Overnight, fans started to hesitate. Had they misunderstood him? Could they still root for a man who now stood at the center of a media storm? With every tabloid headline, every clipped quote, the damage deepened. But David wasn't just going to take the hit and disappear. He was gearing up for war. When he filed a lawsuit against Fremantle Media, it wasn't just about his image. It was about setting a precedent. Confidentiality was sacred, and someone had shattered it. That breach wasn't just unprofessional. It was an alarm bell ringing through the entertainment world. Suddenly, people weren't just watching the scandal. They were questioning their own projects. If a moment of offhand banter could be turned into career chaos, who was safe anymore? Walliams' case cracked open the door on a larger truth. No one behind the camera was truly protected. By launching that legal battle, Walliams wasn't just fighting for his dignity. He was demanding accountability from an industry that often sweeps problems under the red carpet. And as the lawsuit gained traction, the walls at Fremantle began to shake. Their reputation, once solid as stone, now felt fragile and exposed. They eventually offered a formal apology, a gesture that reeked of damage control. By the time the case was quietly settled in November 2023, the cost was already paid in full. Not in cash, but in relationships, reputations, and broken trust. Though the terms were never made public, the whispers were unanimous. Fremantle had dropped the ball, and Williams was walking away with more than just a legal win. But victories like that come at a steep price. The fallout went far beyond courtrooms and contracts. What truly hurt was the rift it carved between David Walliams and Simon Cowell. Once the anchors of the show, they had created moments that defined a generation of television. But now, their bond had crumbled under the pressure. Where there had once been laughter, now there was silence. A tense, wordless void that neither man dared to bridge. Cowell, known for his sharp instincts and icy cool, began to quietly distance himself. Some said it was out of self-preservation. Others believed it was a quiet punishment. Either way, the spark that made their partnership electric was gone. And just when the dust seemed ready to settle, April 1st, 2025 brought a shock that reignited the entire narrative. During an Advertising Week Europe panel, David stepped into the spotlight again. He smiled, joked, and wore his usual charm like armor, but beneath it, something simmered. As the moderator reflected on his time with Britain's Got Talent, David fired a shot dressed as a joke. "I've won Best Judge 4 times." Simon never won. The audience chuckled, unsure if they were supposed to laugh or cringe. That wasn't just a quip. It was a dagger dipped in years of quiet resentment. What seemed like a passing jab peeled back the final layer of their fractured dynamic. For years, Cowell had been the kingmaker, the face of authority, the one who never blinked. But with one sentence, David flipped the power structure. It wasn't about who had more screen time or sharper critiques. It was about recognition, legacy, and the silent battles that rage behind the scenes. That moment felt like a curtain being pulled back, revealing the long-standing tension that had been brushed aside for too long. Hollywood took notice immediately. Rumors reignited. Whispers among producers and insiders grew louder. Walliams and Cowell hadn't spoken in years. That much was now clear. Every attempt to mend fences had been ignored or quietly declined. The warmth they once shared in interviews and red carpets? Gone. Their paths no longer crossed, not even by accident. It was as if they lived in two completely separate timelines, where their shared history was something to be erased, not celebrated. The illusion of unity shattered, and even those closest to the production began to speak with caution. "We're done." That phrase started circulating quietly, as though mourning a once beautiful partnership. The words weren't angry. They were hollow, like an admission that trying any longer would only deepen the wounds. The thought of them sharing a stage again? Unrealistic. They weren't just co-workers with a disagreement. They had become strangers standing on opposite ends of a bridge that had long since burned. What made this so tragic wasn't the scandal itself. It was the unraveling of a dynamic that once made magic. In a time when audiences crave real connection, what happened between Simon and David serves as a reminder that even the most iconic duos can fracture beyond repair. Fame, success, even millions of viewers can't protect against betrayal, hurt, and the slow, irreversible fade of friendship. What remains now isn't just a memory of what was, but a haunting silence of what will never be again. The moment Robbie Williams unleashed that sly remark at Advertising Week Europe, it felt less like a jab and more like a precision strike at the throne Simon Cowell had guarded for decades. The comment about Cowell never clinching the National TV Award for Best Judge wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a dismantling of a legend in real time. For years, Simon had built his reputation as the unbeatable titan of talent shows, the man whose very presence meant instant success. From American Idol to The X Factor to Britain's Got Talent, his name was once the seal of invincibility. But with just a few words, Robbie cracked that image wide open, and the silence that followed said it all. The shockwave didn't just rattle the audience, it triggered something seismic behind the scenes. That dig struck at Simon's very essence. It wasn't about the missing trophy, it was about everything that symbolized legacy, relevance, dominance. Suddenly, the man who once ruled the entertainment space with a smirk and a buzzer was being viewed through a different lens. Williams didn't just toss a stone at Cowell's castle. He pulled back the curtain on what had been brewing beneath the surface for years. Industry insiders felt it. Sponsors, producers, and global partners began second-guessing. If Simon wasn't winning awards, was his era of dominance truly fading? Was the golden age of Cowell-led entertainment drawing to a close? And then came the breaking point. Not in front of flashing cameras or screaming fans, but behind the safety of closed doors. During a tense Britain's Got Talent production meeting, Cowell's composure finally shattered. Surrounded by his trusted circle, those who had stood by him through ratings wars and backstage drama, Simon faced the impossible. They expected leadership. Instead, they witnessed collapse. For the first time in years, the polished mogul let the mask slip. No scripts, no spin, just raw emotion. Rage, grief, and disbelief exploded across the room. Chairs moved, papers flew. But louder than the chaos was the clarity in his voice when he finally said, "We are done." Not shouted, not barked, just whispered, like the air had been sucked out of the room. That sentence wasn't a flare of anger. It was a surrender to reality. The show that had once defined a generation was now at a crossroads. The chemistry between Simon and David had dissolved beyond repair. No clever edit or PR spin could glue it back together. The statement didn't just end a partnership. It marked the collapse of an empire that had run on charm, ruthlessness, and control. And somewhere in that moment, Cowell knew this wasn't just about a feud. It was the end of a chapter in entertainment history. Meanwhile, the aftermath unfurled with unstoppable momentum. News outlets pounced. Social media lit up with speculation. The public, once united in admiration for the iconic duo, now split into factions. Was it all ego? Was there betrayal? Had it always been this fragile? Fans mourned what was lost, while others fed on the drama. Robbie Williams, now untethered from the panel, stepped into a new phase of his career. But the sparkle in his public image had dimmed. The charismatic, cheeky judge was now perceived as sharper, colder, his playful persona now colored by the fallout. His projects continued. His name still carried weight, but the shadow of that feud trailed close behind. As for Cowell, he kept showing up, on red carpets, in interviews, still donning the crisp shirts and tight-lipped smile. But the cracks were visible. The empire still stood, yet its pillars wobbled. He was no longer the untouchable oracle of pop culture. Every public statement, every appearance felt heavy with effort. The man who once shaped global trends now fought to keep up with them. It wasn't just the departure of a co-judge. It was the unraveling of control, the loss of the balance that made his shows magnetic. And in the end, what remained was silence. No reunions, no redemption arcs. Just two men, once bonded by banter and brilliance, now strangers divided by pride and pain. That single phrase, "We are done," echoed through every headline, every whisper in Hollywood's back rooms. It became the coda to an unforgettable saga, one that left a trail of speculation and emotion in its wake. Yet even amid the collapse, Cowell's legacy glimmers with the remnants of past grandeur. If only someone had said the right thing. And there you have it, an explosive unraveling of one of Hollywood's most unforgettable partnerships. From razor-sharp banter to public jabs that shook the industry, Simon Cowell and David Walliams gave us drama that no reality show could ever script. We watched Simon's empire shimmer, then stumble. We saw David trade his cheeky charm for steely resolve. It was never just about a TV show. It was about pride, power, and the slow, silent fate of friendship under the harshest spotlight. So what did we learn? That even the kings of television aren't immune to betrayal. That one cutting remark can crack years of control. And that behind every glittering panel of judges is a storm just waiting to break loose. The tension, the legacy, the unraveling. It's all a reminder that fame may build empires, but egos can bring them down faster than any ratings dip.